heading into the 2015 NHL playoffs. The Vancouver Canucks were in a very interesting situation. Bo Horvat was the Vancouver Canucks' newest rookie at the time, playing on the team, developing properly, scoring some nice goals, and overall coming alive in the playoffs. But a lot of Bo Horvat's development and a lot of his ability to produce came on the stick of his line mates. For a time in the playoffs, Bo Horvat was centering a line with Jannik Hansen, who was a Vancouver Canucks veteran. He lives in North Van now, apparently, and he was here for the Sedin's retirement night. Jannik Hansen, the Honey Badger, is a very beloved Vancouver Canucks alumni player. However, the other guy that was on Bo Horvat's line for a brief moment in the 2015 playoffs was a Latvian 24-year-old, a guy who encapsulated the Vancouver Canucks audiences with what he could have become and where he ultimately came from. Let's talk today about an old Vancouver Canucks player who looked towards having a pretty bright future here in Vancouver, but who just ended up not. Let's talk today about what could have been with Ronalds Kenins. Yeah, Ronnie Kenins. I'm digging way back deep into the history books for this one, and history books not even through like a long time ago. This happened 5 years ago, but Ronnie Kenins is a Vancouver Canucks former prospect who eventually came over to Utica, but who wasn't amazing, but then he went over to Vancouver and he was amazing, and now he is just back in Europe doing his thing in the NLA. Let's take a look at who exactly Ronalds Kenins is before we get into all that. Ronnie Kenins was born February 28th, 1991, and that makes him a little bit of an older guy. Today he is 29 years old. He is listed as 6 feet 201 pounds. He was a guy who was undrafted, plain and simple. He was born in Latvia, meaning that his hockey development took place mostly in Latvia up until he was a teenager when he moved over to Switzerland and played a whole bunch of games in the Swiss League. It was a big transition for the guy to go from Latvia to Switzerland, play with the U20s, the U17 Swiss League, eventually the NLB, and then eventually the NLA, all while representing Team Latvia internationally many, many times. You could say that Latvia is not necessarily a super strong hockey country, so any international tournament that would come, you could bet that Ronalds Kenins was a guy that would suit up. On his Elite Prospects page, it's listed that Ronalds Kenins has 104 international games played for Team Latvia, which is not really surprising if you ask me. Starting in 2011-2012, though, at the very, very ripe age of 20, Ronalds Kenins was a guy who eventually started playing in the Swiss League full-time for the Zurich Lions. He had 18 points in 47 games, mostly as just a middle six winger. In 2012-13, he improved to 17 points in 45 games, and then he got signed by the Canucks at the end of the season. Wait a minute, what the heck? That's a lot of progression right there. The guy's 21 years old, he gets 17 points in 45 games, and all of a sudden he's a Vancouver Canucks prospect? What gives? Well, starting that season in 2012-13, the Zurich Lions got themselves a new coach. His name was Mark Crawford. And apparently, it was Mark Crawford who told the Vancouver Canucks, hey, if there's anything that I want to do for this city, I want you to sign this guy. Sign this Ronnie Kenins. Sign this guy because he's going to become a great player. He's only 21 years of age right now. He's gotten himself 17 points in 45 games. Yeah, I know that, but there is an NHL projectability with this player. Obviously, that's not verbatim what he said, I'm just inferring, making the story sound a little bit better. But eventually, Mike Gillis signed Ronalds Kenins as the last free agent he ever signed, pretty much, so that's some fun trivia for you over there. And in 2013-14, he played another year with the ZSC Lions as a loaned player, getting 25 points in 39 games. It's a much better number. And afterwards, he made his way over to the Utica Comets in the AHL, boasting up a somewhat impressive 12 points in 36 games. Not amazing, but not terrible indeed. It's actually kind of funny because halfway through this season is where the Vancouver Canucks started to get a whole bunch of injuries. Injuries happen to the Canucks, we all know this, we're familiar with this, but when it was time to call up a player from the Utica Comets, The Vancouver Canucks had options. They had a whole bunch of guys in Utica doing their thing and being extraordinarily productive players. Some of the best point producers from the Comets that season included Ryan O'Reilly's brother Cal O'Reilly, Brandon DeFazio, Alexander Grenier, Dustin Jeffrey, a whole bunch of really nice pieces, Hunter Shinkaruk and Brendan Gaunce included. But it was the unlikely Latvian Ronalds Kenins who got his name called up instead. In his first NHL game against the Buffalo Sabres, Ronalds Kenins went pointless. But in his second game against the Minnesota Wild, he was actually put on the power play, and as the power play expired, Bo Horvat sent a nice little pass over to the side, Kenins picked it up, and Kenins shot it, and he scored in his second NHL game. Then, the next game against the Winnipeg Jets, just 2 days later, it's Bo Horvat again, throwing it out to the side. Kenins takes it, he shoots it, and he scores! Ronalds Kenins had 2 goals in 3 games played, starting out his career alongside of Bo Horvat, and Canucks fans were excited. However, for the entire year and all the stats combined, he played a full 30 games. And getting 12 points in the process, 4 goals, 8 assists for 12 points for a 23 turning 24-year-old left-wing, right-wing player. In the playoffs, he scored a really nice goal set up by Bo Horvat, and going into the next season, Canucks fans were so excited to see the future of Ronalds Kenins as a guy who developed in the Swiss League, in the Pro Leagues, in international tournaments time in and time out, who was recommended by Mark Crawford, and who found some very early chemistry with Bo Horvat. I remember back then people were putting Kenins as Bo Horvat's potential best line mate in the future. Once Bo Horvat was in his prime, Ronalds Kenins could be that great energy winger that plays alongside him and allows Bo to do his thing. Because Kenins was relatively young and he had quite a bit of success at the NHL level, people thought there was staying power with this player to some capacity. However, Kenins didn't make the team immediately in the next season. He played with the Utica Comets, getting 23 points in 41 games, and he got called up a few times here for the Vancouver Canucks. He played 8 games and he had 0 points. Then he went back to Switzerland, playing some games with the Lions, then playing with the Lausanne Hockey Club, where he still is today, getting 20 points in 44 games. So Ronalds Kenins is pretty much, as a 29-year-old guy now, just a normal Swiss League hockey player who isn't really going to play in the NHL anymore. But there was a time where the intensity, the drive, and the impact that he made at the NHL level was so captivating for Canucks fans that we were all just so excited to see what would happen next. It's unfortunate that he never really worked out long-term in the NHL, but that small few days where he was a really good point producer for the Canucks is always something that I'm going to remember as a very, very bright light as to what could have become as we were watching Bo Horvat start the youth movement in Vancouver. You gotta remember, this is before we drafted Boeser. This is before Petey, this is before Hughes. We still had the Sedins and Burrows and all these other guys on the team. Adam Clendenning was a D-man playing in the power play, and we also had Tom Sestito. This was the last time the Canucks ever had 30 goals scored for them in a season, and it was done by Radim Verbata. This was a time where the best players on the Canucks were older, and we were looking towards the future, looking towards the youth, and Bo Horvat was the big catalyst of that. It's just that Ronnie Kenins, as a 23, 24-year-old guy, was right alongside him in the passenger seat. So that's a little bit of a blast back to the past, talking about Ronnie Kenins and how his career has gone from the Vancouver Canucks back to Switzerland. Obviously, I love Ronnie Kenins. I will always remember what he was able to do. I played this guy in my GM mode all the way back in NHL, I think 14 or 15 or whatever, and I put him at franchise just to let him grow. He grew to a 95 overall, and he was a guy who put up like 100 points a season. Obviously, that's not going to happen ever, but like, it's still fun to reminisce on all the old stuff that happened with Vancouver Canucks players and prospects formerly. It's also kind of funny to see that he was even here only because Mark Crawford recommended that the Canucks signed him. There will always be that link, and I'll always be grateful thinking and reflecting upon it as well. So comment down below what you think about Ronalds Kenins. Do you remember all the stuff I'm talking about? If you're a younger viewer, you probably don't. If you're an older viewer, you probably do. But Ronalds Kenins to me was always a limelight in a very interesting transitional season, and he will always be somebody that I remember quite fondly. So I hope you enjoyed this video social /9, and bye.